So you like true crime? I went to school with a murderer, and I live to tell the tale. Welcome to Curiosity Chronicles. Today we're going to talk about the relationship, the friendship, we were pals, a guy that I went to school with who murdered his entire family. Yeah, and I don't know why he's on my mind so much lately. I mean, I've thought about him a few times over the years, but I don't know why suddenly he's really, really strongly in my mind. And part of me does actually wonder if he recently died. And that's why this is kind of coming up energetically for me. That maybe his spirit or soul wants something said about him. So here we go. I'm going to take you back to 1984. And yes, I'm old. And the government of Canada put out a piece of legislation called the Young Offenders Act. And this is important details to go with this story that will connect some dots later on. So there were a couple really important parts of this legislation. And I'm just going to turn my camera a little bit. There we go. Of this legislation. And one of them was that, so it's for anybody under the age of 18 who's committed a crime. Your name would be kept out of the media and the police would not. So your name would be never said to protect your identity, which makes a lot of sense because, you know, if you're like 15 years old and you steal a pack of gum and you get charged, like, should that affect you for the rest of your life? Probably not. It was the 80s. We were all committing crimes every day. Gen X represent, right? So that was important, that the name of the accused would not be published or spoken or anything like that. The other really important part of this piece of legislation is that the maximum sentence that you could receive if convicted is 2 years. So I understand that the spirit of this piece of legislation was like, let's not punish kids for the rest of their lives for doing stupid things like we used to do in the 80s, joyriding in a friend's dad's car and, all that kind of stuff, stealing gum, stealing a bottle of booze from a friend's house, and then you'd all go to a field and drink it and the cops would have to drive you home. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. The 80s was a wild time. Watch Stranger Things and you'll see what I'm talking about. So that happened. That piece of legislation came out in 1984, and that dramatically affected everything that went on with this guy. I'm not going to say his name. If anybody desperately needs to know more about this, I can kind of point you in the right direction. But what I find really curious is how little information there is about this case out there, even 40 years later. Like, that's what I started Googling because I'm like, what's going on? Why is this guy on my mind so much right now? And so I was Googling. I searched Facebook. I tried anything to find anything about the case, what may have happened. What I really wanted was to find the yearbook photos from grade 7 and 8. So you could see the dramatic difference in this boy from those 2 years. And I thought, well, surely in 40 years, somebody's posted these photos and said, oh, yeah, And I couldn't find anything. I really couldn't find. I found a couple blogs that talked about it with the names changed and everything else, but we knew what it was. We knew what the story was about. But that's it. And so given that the way the police and the media messed up so much on this case, I am starting to think that now, even all these years later, the internet is being scrubbed of anything that mentions him, which is really easy to do. There's companies that can do that. If you think it can't be done, yeah, it can. When I used to work in the funeral industry, we had companies that would come in and tell us about their service, which was scrubbing the internet of, so before you die, when you do your pre-arrangements, you could also pay for this service to have basically your entire, anything you've ever put just scrubbed from the internet. Anything you've posted, your name, anything like that, just scrubbed. So it can be done. I know if you know who Melanie Ann Layer is, a few years ago, the internet kind of blew up with all kinds of things about her. People were saying a lot of different things. I don't know if any of it was true or not. It doesn't matter. But I do know that she had a lot of that removed from the internet. So you can't find it now. So that's why everybody screenshots everything. Okay. So there really is not a lot of information out there about this guy and this case and anything else that's happened since then. So in April 1985, I woke up to find out, one Sunday morning, woke up to find out that this guy I knew from school had murdered his entire family, and he had been arrested. It was in the papers and everything else. So the first mistake that went on was that the police identified his parents and his sister. So they're saying, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so, and named them full names, said they were murdered by their son, whose name will not be released under the Young Offenders Act. And we're like, we all knew who it was. We all knew who it was. It's nothing to laugh about, but still, it's just like, but this was the first time that this piece of legislation was really being challenged and put to the test, because it was written for stupid little petty crimes that kids commit. It wasn't written for murderers. No one thought a 15-year-old, or no, he was 14 at the time. Nobody thought that a 14-year-old was going to go home and kill his family. So the story goes that he, I think it was on a Saturday morning, he got his father's gun, I think it was a shotgun, and his parents were in bed, and he shot both of them, and they would have been killed instantly. And from the news reports, their heads were no longer attached to their bodies. So it was pretty dramatic. It's pretty dramatic. And then he went and shot his sister, his little sister. I think she was 7 at the time. And apparently she did not die instantly, but a short time later. So he's now murdered his whole family. And he went out, so it was Saturday, he went out and did what kids did, teenagers did in the 80s. And we went and hung out with our friends and went to the arcade and, ate ice cream and did all of that kind of stuff. And apparently, according to the police and the news, he had taken a couple of his friends back to the house to show them what he had done. And I think he was arrested on the Sunday, because surely someone's parents had called the police and said, I think you need to go talk to this child. And so there were a few little things that went on in following all of that. There was a guy that I knew who was friends with him, with the boy who murdered his family. And he had told me that on the Friday, the murderer boy had said to him, okay, I'm going home to kill my family. I'll see you later. And just like when somebody says something like that, you're like, oh, yeah, I'll see you on Monday. Have a good weekend. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, right. Because it was the 80s and adults were the enemy. So it wasn't the most ridiculous thing for someone to say jokingly. You know what I mean? It's like the way kids are like, my parents are going to kill me. No, your parents are not going to kill you. It's just going to be, uncomfortable. So, so he told me that, and then I did wonder if this boy that told me this, what he had said on the Friday, if he was one of the boys that was taken back to the house. I never knew. I didn't even think to ask him at the time, and we're going back. Like, we were just kids, right? We weren't equipped to handle any of this. And apparently the boy who murdered his family, he did call a classmate or a friend to say, I did it. And so I did wonder, now I look back and I'm like, I wonder if it was the same guy. I wonder if the same boy was sort of pulled into this story. There was a girl that I knew who lived between the school and my house. And occasionally, if we were leaving the school at the same time, would just walk and chat. And then she would go on her way and I would keep going. And she was one of the people that the boy who murdered his family went and hung out with that day. She had no idea. He knocked on her door and was like, hey, do you want to come hang out? We'll go to the mall, whatever. And so she did. And she had no idea at all. And the next thing she knows, the police are banging at her door, wanting to know what she knows. it was a lot. And again, we were just 14. We were just kids, you know? Like, I look back now and I think, holy smokes. So yeah, I did know this guy. I knew him to say hello. I had conversations with him. I remember one conversation in particular where we were at school. I think we might have been in a stairwell or in a hallway or something. And he was sitting with his back to the wall facing me with his legs. And I was sitting with my back to the wall with my leg. And so we were just sitting there chatting. I don't know why. I don't know how it came about, but I remember sitting there with him chatting. And I'm not going to say what he told me in that conversation, but I look back now and I wish an adult had overheard that conversation. Yeah, I wish an adult had overheard it. So I grew up in quite a dysfunctional setting. There was abuse and alcoholism and violence and everything else. So when I was that age and somebody was telling me their chaotic story, it didn't sound that crazy to me. It's sort of only anybody who's lived in like an abusive setting. It's really not until you're an adult and you're at dinner and you're telling a story and everybody's horrified that you realize this, that wasn't good. That was kind of crazy, wasn't it? So looking back now, if I overheard one of my son's friends speaking the way this boy was speaking, I probably would have pursued a conversation to dig a little deeper. So the police and the media and everything all said that he was listening to Iron Maiden and had sort of adopted the personality of this character called Eddie, which was connected to Iron Maiden, the metal band. And this is back in the time when, you know, we were all being told that metal would make you a Satanist and, you know, whatever. I think being a Satanist makes you a Satanist, not listening to metal. And he was reading the Satanic Bible. And the dramatic difference in how he looked from grade 7 to grade 8 was astounding. In grade 7, his yearbook photo was, I think he was wearing a hockey jersey. You know, he had like nerdy hair, you know, just a nerdy boy, right? Nerdy 12, 13-year-old boy. And then in grade 8, his yearbook photo, he looked like something was going on. He looked like something was going on. And he was like all in black. He looked very much like a goth now. He looked like honestly at this point in our history in the Western world, you'd pass him in the street and you wouldn't even blink an eye at this point. At that time, it was dramatic, but we were all, because we didn't really have parents, like we were just feral children running around the world. And, well, not running around the world, running around our world. And so we all dressed and looked in a way that was really expressing who we were, expressing, you know, we didn't have, like, I look at kids now, like anytime I go to my son's high school and I look at the girls, I'm like, you can't tell these girls apart. They all look exactly the same. They're all wearing black leggings, you know, white sweatshirts. They've all got the same hair, you can't tell them apart. And when I look back on high school, and even when I go through my yearbook photos and things like that, we were all so different. We really all expressed ourselves. And I found there was less of that needing to fit in, because we all fit in that we didn't fit in. And so there was a lot more of that. Of course, you had, you know, your jocks and the punks and, you know, whatever, but it wasn't as dramatic as it seems to be now. Everybody hung out together. So you could see that there was something going on inside of him because of this dramatic difference. Like, imagine if, you know, you've got Pee Wee Herman in grade 7 and Marilyn Manson in grade 8. That's how dramatic it was. And I know that, you know, all the reports were like, it was the music, it was the Satanism, blah, 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 blah. Based on the conversation that I had with him in the hallway that day, Looking back 40 years later, I would say there was something else going on in the home. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because there's nothing that can be done about it now. Like, it's so long ago, there's nothing. And I think maybe that's why I have thought about him over the years, not every day, but certainly every few years. I think, I wonder whatever happened to him. So the reports where I did, when I was researching to talk about this, the report said that he was sentenced a year later. So in 1986, he was sentenced. He would have been 15. And if we were going by the Young Offenders Act, he got 2 years in a detention center. He may have gotten longer. I'm not 100% certain on that because, like I said, there's so little information about it. But apparently, for a couple of years, he was in a youth detention center and he was offered psychiatric assessment and support. And he said no, which is his right, even though he was a minor. And if he was released on schedule according to the Young Offenders Act, he would still be a minor when he was released. I remember being at high school, and it was about 2 years after his trial, after he was sentenced, and we were all like, today would be the 2-year mark. And we all wondered if he would come back or what would happen, like what would he do? Because he would be released free and clear. And he could go through his life and no one would ever know. Like, if you said his name now and you tried to Google his name, you would find out nothing about these 3 murders. Which is why I think that the government has made sure that there's nothing ever posted, which is why I'm not going to say his name. So yeah, that's the story. And it's been 40 years. It was April of 1985 that this happened. So it's been 40 years. And he came into my head the other day and has been hanging out. And I've been thinking a lot about it. And as much as what he did was horrific, absolutely horrific, inexcusable, but I do have a certain amount of compassion for him, not like in some woke nonsense sort of way, but I do have a little bit of compassion for him because I think there was more to the story that we never heard. I think, like I said, I think there was something else going on. And that's what sort of triggered this domino effect of events leading up to these murders. So there you have it. I survived a murderer. And I have no idea where he is. I have no idea if he's still alive. I have no idea if he's dead. That I do wonder if he has recently died, and that's why he's kind of hanging around in my head a bit. But I don't know. I don't know. But I thought, for his sake and for the sake of his soul, perhaps, that this story just needed to be told. So here it is. Thank you so much. Have a great day and stay curious.